Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm speaking from Monarch Butterfly Land Saving Society. I've been studying very diligently ways to improve the desert climates, which is of interest to me since I live in Southern California, a very dry and arid and hot desert climate with some of the hottest regions in the United States, especially in our Death Valley area with the lowest elevation, I think, in the United States, and some of the hottest summers that you can imagine. So we work a lot on studying the desert climate, and have been finding all different kinds of little tricks that help, that make things a little easier. And one of the things that we've noticed is that if you study the soil, something important to take note in a desert is what color the soil is, and if it's considered a hot desert or cold desert. In America, in Mexico, we have many deserts that are considered cold deserts. They're bereft of vegetation. They don't have a lot of vegetation. They're barren. They don't have much. They seem to have some moisture, but they seem cold. Like it's a gray soil, but it's a dark soil, and it's a dark gray, and it seems to have even some moisture, but nothing's growing, and it seems that something's wrong with the soil. Maybe it's related to military exercises or testing of nuclear bombs or something, that certain parts of the earth are a desert, maybe different from the hot deserts. I don't know why certain are hot and certain are cold. I don't know. But anyway, in the cold deserts, we've been thinking, what is something we can do to warm it up? And we feel that planting certain types of colors in the desert will warm up the soil. We know that the sun attracts through the spectrum of color certain colors from above permeating down from the spectrum from the sun, or through the rainbow effect, so to speak, would attract a certain colors on the ground. If you had red flowers, you would probably see that the red light, the reds of the sun, would be attracted to the red on the ground. If you had yellow flowers, the yellow light would be attracted to the yellow flowers, etc. In the cold deserts, a way to warm it up would be to think of maybe something red that would do well in a cold environment. I think that the apple tree is a perfect kind of vegetation for a cold desert, because I feel that apples do really well in cold climates. They're a hard fruit. They're known to be very tough, and I think they sustain well in a cold environment, whereas an orange or a citrus is well known to do well in a warm environment. So in a cold desert, I would try and plant, if you don't want to plant saplings in the middle of the desert and assume they'll do well, it would probably be better to plant seeds, or maybe the whole apple itself with the core slightly cut out a little bit. You could put a little saline water in it to warm it up a tiny bit. You could poke holes in the apple itself and then hope that the seeds, being sort of washed through with the saline, which is a technique that gardeners use to prepare seeds. They do decontaminate them and put them through some kind of water processing thing. You could do that. You could put the apple cores a little bit cut up, and you could put them in a bag of water, saline water, just to get the seeds ready to germinate. And you could leave them there a few days. They say it's good. You could just leave them at room temperature. And then when you feel they're ready, maybe after a week or so, you could then plant them in the ground. And you could even put a little saline you could put a little hole at the top of the apple. You could pour a little saline in so it touches around the seed. You could put a little cut out part so that there's a little dwelling spot for the saline water. You could, of course, you would do that before you would immerse it in saline water, a bunch of apples in a bag in saline water, and then just, let it be, them germinate. Then you could put some saline water in those spots and put the apples upright down into the ground with little pinpricks in the apple so the roots can start to come out through the germinating seeds and germinate into the cold soil. We feel that the red of the apples will attract the red of the sun and will bring warmth to the cold deserts. We also think it's a healthy type of plant, hardy, very strong. It would also germinate roots and a network of strength for a desert environment. The worst part of the deserts is that it's degraded soil. There's nothing growing there. It's not alive. There's not oxygen. There's not water. There's not minerals. Roots develop a channel of oxygen and water and flow and a strength to hold down the soil. So if there's a windstorm, the soils won't be blowing every which way. The gophers will start to come. The birds will sow the seeds. If things are blooming, the moisture will come, and then these roots will get heavier and heavier and thicker, and they'll create a network to support the desert ground, and it will become less barren and more fruitful. We feel that apple trees planted this way in a cold desert or in a cold spot where something cold meets something warm, say the edge of a mountain where it's very cold, where it spreads out to a more desert environment, is also a place for apple trees. In a hot desert, we feel a different type of fruit would be better. The orange or the cantaloupe or melons come to mind, or pumpkins. The pumpkins have an extremely hard shell and can be protected from the heat. The orange will bring in a more orange hue and will tone down the red that comes to the desert floors. In Africa, the soils predominantly are red and attract the red hot part of the sun, the ultraviolet rays that is very dangerous for people, animals, all life, including the plants and the food we eat, and the vegetation that is there for shade and all kinds of things. The thing to do to stop maybe the red hot ultraviolet rays hitting the red soil or attracting to it is to try and plant things that bring in the cooler rays. A lot of people believe in planting wildflowers like lavender. Fields and fields of lavender, they're wild, they'll grow wild in a hospitable environment. Will bring in the cool purples of the sun, which is a much cooler ray, and then that red soil might tone down because the ultraviolet rays will be blocked. The trick is to find soil that's healthy and hospitable enough to grow lavender, and one of the places maybe to look into that would be people living in the north of Europe. They plant fields and fields of lavender, I think in the Netherlands or Holland, and maybe they would have books or online materials showing what type of soils work well for planting wild lavender plants. I don't really know enough about flower planting as much as other things, but I think the most important thing is making sure the soil is ready. The gopher population that lives under the soil could be nourished, maybe with corn. Corn is a light yellow color. It's much more cool than the reds of the soil. If the gophers were to eat the light yellow corn, which is very liquidy and very moist, they might aerate the soil and change its qualities, make it more available to plant these lavender plants. Or you could start and go one color less than the red and go towards orange and not really think in terms of lavender yet, and think maybe later you'd get to lavender. Maybe the first thing to do would be to plant a very dark orange, so you could take one step away from the ultraviolet red and go into the oranges. Pumpkins are an excellent plant. You could do the same thing you do with apples. You could put a pumpkin together, cut out part of it, keep most of it intact, and create channels around the seeds and I would put saline or salt water in there, and I would let the seeds germinate for a number of days, just in the cool, maybe not direct sunlight. And then I would put the whole pumpkin in the ground with the saline water and some pinpricks in the pumpkin so the seeds can sprout right through the pumpkin and take hold in the ground. I think rather than lavender, I would try with pumpkins. They're very hard. They're very safe. They're secure. They do feed the rodents in a way. But I would try and germinate the seeds that way. The rodents might eat them. The other thing is to always think in terms of taking care of the animals. While you're doing this, maybe the corn on the ground, or putting some corn in little holes where the rodents live, so they'll eat the corn and maybe respect the pumpkins. And you could put the pumpkins, and then the light might change from a red hot light attracting to the red hot soil to an orange, more or less orange light. We feel that a less hot light would be much healthier, and it would be safer, and it would bring a much less heat to the desert of the hot deserts. There's also the very sandy deserts, which are very barren, which may not be red, but they may not be like the dank, cold deserts. And there are shades in between the cold and the very hot, where there's sort of an orange desert and a yellow desert. And I think that shows the heat level. The orange deserts, you might try and plant gold flowers like sunflowers, go one step cooler. And in the yellow desert, you might try and do something, I don't know, that soil in a way, I guess I haven't thought that through yet. I'm not sure. So I would think the very yellow deserts are almost dead. So the thing to do would maybe be to work around the oasis areas where there still is water and green life, and maybe work around the oases and plant right around it with something that takes into account the colder green and water environment of the oasis and whatever color soil exists around there. If it's bright red, then it's hot versus cold, or if it's more gray, then it's probably a cooler sand spreading out from the oases, and maybe a pumpkin or even an apple tree would go well right around an oasis, or an apple but not a red apple or a golden apple around the oasis. So you take into account a colder area but a warmer environment, and not the red very hard apples, but the softer apples like the golden delicious apples, and do the same process and plant the whole apple around the oases. In an orange desert, you might again try the pumpkins, or a fruit, or either maybe a pumpkin, or a squash, a yellow squash, or yellow gourd. There are different things, and there are different things. It's always good to see where you're starting from and where you want to go. It's always that you want to either warm things up or cool things down, and then bring the soil to temperate, like 50-50 balance. I hope this helps, and I hope in the red hot soils of Africa, you'll consider the germination process of pumpkins, and in the cold deserts of, say, Mexico and in parts of the United States near the mountains, you would consider the germinating the red apples. Around oases in places in the Sahara or other deserts, I would put golden apples around the oases and do the germination effort there. Thank you. I hope that helps. The other thing to do, which is very important, is if you eat fruit or vegetables or any seed fruit or any seeds at all in your food or seed vegetable, don't throw the seeds out in the garbage when you're finished with your apple or your orange or your cantaloupe or anything else. Just throw it out in your garden. It's bad to waste any seeds. They should go back right to the earth. Thank you.